I'm not Mitch Connor, and today, what some call Christmas or Christ Mass, I am going to read you a little bit about history about Charles Dickens and A Christmas Carol with Ebenezer Scrooge. This is from the section entitled "The Scrooge." I spent 8 months going through this website over a year ago, and including verifying about everything that I didn't know, and very little could I not verify. Just so you know, and that includes this section. I could verify it. It goes, the Christmas productions of Grinch and Scrooge, on closer examination, are nothing more than hate propaganda directed against people who, for conscientious reasons, preferred not to recognize Rome's Christ Mass. Who were these awful Scrooges? They were actually the Jewish and Protestant New England founding fathers of America. And while they had no desire to celebrate Rome's Christ Mass, they were opposing Rome's slavery in the South, where the first Christmas in America was made state law, thanks to the Valladolid Catholicism promoted by Jesuit slave traders in southern slave port cities. Later, this theology became the basis of the Klan, the Ku Klux Klan, and its promotion of Christ Mass in the 1920s. Scrooge is a residual orgy of anti-Semitism, as many Jewish children are aware, and the promotion of devil worship, composed by Dickens, who referred to his most famous villain as the Jew, and created the most vile anti-Semitic caricature ever penned in the history of the English language. The ghost of Christmas past did not haunt Ebenezer, a real man Dickens misrepresented, but rather Dickens himself, who destroyed 20 years of letters to hide his own demonic past. And of course, the most amazing thing of all, if all this were not already enough, the beloved classic tale of the Christmas Carol narrates the story of a man not rectified to life until praised. Sorry, that just kind of went wrong. There are a few typos on this, so. Until he prays to demons and repents for refusing them his submission. And Christians support this story? Protestant Christians? Christian devil worshippers who think they worship Christ? And of course, in appreciation for this grand act of delusional propaganda and anti-Semitism, Masonic lodges all over America hold Charles Dickens Christmas dinners in his honor. Now, I'm not going to go through this whole page, but if you noticed how much of a jump I made here on the right pane, there's quite a lot of content here. Anyway, Dickens and the Jew moneylender. The occupation of the Scrooge character was banking, or that of a professional moneylender. An occupation notoriously Jewish since the appointment of the profession to the Jews by the Roman papacy during the Dark Ages, thinking it damned them to hell, but providing the necessary financial services needed by the empire. The source of this social development at the hands of Rome itself provided one of the more famous anti-Semitic canards against Jews in Europe for centuries, even used by Hitler. Scrooge is admittedly a name that was created in the imagination of Charles Dickens. The man's name, which served as an inspiration for his story, was actually Scroggy. So how did Scroggy become Scrooge? The character itself gave birth to the change in name, although most Dickens scholars admit there was never a plausible explanation given by Dickens himself for the name. Scrooge, a blend of the greedy Jew stereotype propagated by the Roman Church for centuries, the puritanical Protestant, dressed in only black and white, a complete lie from its beginning, was combined and turned into the now familiar negative stereotype, the Ebenezer Scrooge. The original name Scroggy, pronounced Scroggy, had been altered to Scrooge. Ironically, when Scrooge is pronounced backwards, it audio-phonetically creates the phrase Jew works. And there's an audio file right here to demonstrate that, but if you actually read it backwards and take out the E in Scrooge, because it's not going to register the E, well, yeah, it comes out as Jew works. To further illustrate Dickens' use of inverted dictation, one of his favorite novels, entitled David Copperfield, is noted by literary critics as having been the most autobiographical of all his works. And in keeping with that observation, the initials for David Copperfield, used as DC, are the inverted form of his own initials, CD. Thus, the use of inversion in his work is an admitted feature of his writing, even by literary critics. And this website and this page goes more into his experiments in occultism and mind control, including mesmerism, hypnotism. Then here's more about Ebenezer Lennox Scroggy. In life, Scroggie was apparently a rambunctious, generous, and licentious man who gave wild parties, impregnated the odd serving wench, and was once wonderfully interrupted at the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland by grabbing the buttocks of a hapless countess. However, it was in 1841 when his entire life was misconstrued by Dickens. Dickens was in the capital to deliver a lecture to an audience of Edinburgh notables. He was wandering the city, killing time before the talk, when he visited Canongate Kirk graveyard. There, as revealed by his diaries, he saw a memorial slab which read, Ebenezer Lennox Scroggie, a mealman. The description referred to his main trade as a corn merchant. However, the author mistakenly translated it as mead man. Though he was shocked by the description, it gave him food for thought, and 2 years later art imitated life, or so the author believed. When A Christmas Carol, one of Dickens' finest works, which was published in 1843, it featured Ebenezer Scrooge, a mean man, erroneously based on Ebenezer Scroggie. Dickens always believed his creation was rooted in truth. And there's a little bit more to the use of the name Ebenezer. Even the inspiration for the name itself was sadly a mistaken lie by Dickens, quite the opposite of the truth in more ways than one. The choice, however, of this name from among the many that could have been used, and the composite character made up as fictional Ebenezer Scrooge, was not lost on the audience of his day. Ebenezer Erskine, also from Scotland, was a famous antagonist against the observance of Christmas in Scotland. The same location the name Ebenezer was chosen from. Scrooge repeats many of the complaints about the observance of Christmas that Ebenezer Erskine has advocated, and Dickens himself, an upper-class Englishman who advocated Christmas against Ebenezer Erskine's position, was well informed of the controversy. So if you recall the character Scrooge, this description of Scroggie is not the same as Scrooge. Quite the opposite, actually. Now, did you know what humbug means? Origin is unknown at the etymology, but something designed to deceive and mislead, or a willingly false, deceptive, or insincere person. 2. An attitude or spirit of pretense and deception. Synonym C. Imposture. Imposture, the act or practice of deceiving by means of an assumed character or name. An instance of imposture. Their synonyms include fraud, counterfeit. Okay. So you see what Ebenezer Scrooge was really doing there, interestingly enough, is, well, saying that Christmas is fraudulent. Yes. And it is. This website very well goes through the history of that. And it's good to understand that, I personally think. And much more that's on this website. It kind of all connects to Christmas. Then he also connects it to, apparently there's a lot of churches that bear the name as Ebenezer in America, including the one, Ebenezer Baptist Church, where Dr. Martin Luther King preached. So there's close to 20,000 here, right? And not a single one is Catholic. Can you believe it? And of course you got Ebenezer, meaning stone of help. Yep. And I'm sure you knew Fish Hat Pope, Dagon Hat. Yep. You know, this also goes through the Jesuit connection to slavery and the Protestant Puritans that were trying to overturn slavery. So that's kind of interesting. And this website goes into more into the history of the whole Santa Claus thing, including the connection to this Yes, Virginia letter that led to A Miracle on 34th Street. I'm sure you at least know of the story, if you don't know the story, but the letter was a complete fraud. Okay. And it also goes into The Grinch of Christmas. And Dr. Seuss, and who Dr. Seuss really was. He wasn't that good of a guy, okay? And he might have been a pedophile too, just like Dickens. And yeah. The genre of institutionalized hate propaganda known as the Grinch is actually an intentional application of Stage 3 of the genocide process, in which target minority religious and ethnic groups are compared to animals and insects. Grinching. Definition. 1. Promotion of derogatory labeling, such as Scrooge or Grinch, in reference to religious, philosophical, and ethnic minorities that are conscientious objectors to Rome's solar mass and its use of compulsion for homogeneous public enforcement. Of course, the Rome solar mass part was added, but as an example. Question. What do you say when people call you a Grinch? Answer. Remind them the Grinch was the one wearing the Santa Claus suit and deceiving children into the very opposite of all they thought they were doing. You're not the one wearing the Santa Claus suit, are you? Theodore Geisel is the real name of Dr. Seuss, by the way. And the mainstream, of course, will tirelessly defend this guy, but you can read all of this yourself, but there are some things that I'm going to go over that are pertinent. Oh yeah, he did openly tell his audience that the Grinch character was actually himself. Maybe you want to pause it here and look at this. You don't know about the Nag Hammadi texts? Good thing to learn about. He called himself Dr. Seuss because of Zeus. This little picture. Standard Nicolaitans instruction to children. The Cat in the Hat. Don't tell your mother. You remember Jerry Sandusky, don't you? Penn State. The very German Lutheran church that Geisel grew up in was part of the Missouri Synod, a conservative branch of the Lutheran Church. In terms of historical evangelical doctrine, it is very historical and very orthodox in that sense, but unfortunately is also one of the more pro-Nazi branches of the Lutheran churches in America. Though one's a pentagram and one's a basically a hexagram, six-pointed star. Still is kind of interesting that the Sneetches had to wear a star on the belly and the Jews had to wear a star on their shirt. Yeah, he was also a big fan of Charles Dickens, and he was an early employee of General Electric. Made huge profits inventing and selling Christmas tree lights, which is originally called the Mazda lights, after the Persian goddess Ahura Mazda, aka Asherah in the Old Testament. And speaking of subtext of pedophilia, German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, targeting children. There is no absurdity so obvious that it cannot be firmly planted in the human head if you only begin to impose it before the age of 5, by constantly repeating it with an air of great solemnity. And Geisel, I'm subversive as hell. What a nice thing for an author of children's books that are supposedly wholesome to say. Subversive. The act of subverting, the state of being subverted, especially a systematic attempt to overthrow or undermine a government or political system by persons working secretly from within. Interesting. Yeah. And, well, he had a bit of a dirty mouth. He never had kids of his own. You make 'em, I amuse 'em, he once said. And, but that his wife said in an interview, he couldn't just sit down on the floor and play with them. And, well, he's a bit uncomfortable and afraid around them. Maybe because he was attracted to them. That's quite possible. Maybe you want to take a look at this little image. And his wife killed herself. And it likely had something to do with him. He was the DDT man who poisoned millions of children for money. He created the ads for the Flit, which is made out of DDT. With that classic saying, "Quick, Henry, get the Flit." And there's this nice little ad. "Don't worry, Papa. Willie just swallowed a bug, and I'm having him gargle with Flit." Wonderful. And funny enough that he did that, author and farmer Will Allen believes that the positive pro-environmental themes of the Lorax stemmed from Geisel's own attempt to scrub clean his early cartooning legacy that helped introduce chemicals into the food supply and everyday life. Monsanto may very well have been born out of this man. He may have given children diabetes through that, and deformity and birth defects. Neurological disease. Filled the world with carcinogenic toxicity. Destroyed the breasts of mothers and filled their babies' milk with poison. Pause here if you want to see all the parallels to the Grinch. And here's some interesting covers to end this. Hop on Pop. One fish, two fish, young fish, old fish. Dr. Seuss pops up. I think this is added a celebration you don't tell mommy about. Can you make Mr. Brown moo? Mr. Brown, you know what I mean, like butthole? I had trouble getting Sala to swallow. Swallow some cum. It's Okay, I'm a Doctor by Dr. Seuss. And of course, he's bending over. Hmm. And he was also into adult porn. What a great guy. What great people these Christmas authors are. Merry Christmas.